Welcome to our panel workshop, Integrating Ethics by Design, Fostering Responsible AI through Multidisciplinary Collaboration. I'm very proud to have this multidisciplinary team on stage, Marielle, Wolf, Natalia. They will introduce themselves in a minute. Very happy to have people from the business side, the technology side, from UI. My name is Bernadette, Wesdorp. I will be moderating this session, so it will be a workshop Q&A session where you hear all the different perspectives from the multidisciplinary approach, and that's actually what I also like most. Talking to a lot of people, I think we all need each other in the AI roadmap, from the technical side, data side, legal, technological side, so very pleased to be here today. At the end, there will be also some room for questions, so if you have questions, please write them down and we'll come back to you. Marielle, over to you. Please introduce yourself. What's your role?
Yeah, I will. So my name is Marielle Versteegen. I work at ING. So just a quick poll. How many people from financial institutions are in the room today? Wonderful. What firm? What firm? Rabobank. Welcome. And I see. Welcome. Good. Maybe there's something to learn. Maybe I can learn later from you. So I'm in charge of data protection compliance in ING. I'm globally responsible. So we have a very mature organization looking into personal data protection, and the general directive on personal data is very much about using personal data in a responsible way, and that is very closely related to ethical dilemmas in the use of data, and therefore also responsible use of AI. So we have a very natural fit with the topic at hand today. And so we are involved in all strategic programs, we are involved in all new technology programs that basically process data and personal data. And there are a lot of them. So we have a lot of exposure, we learn really fast, and there are some good learnings. And some of the learnings are that you need to have a good governance. It seems like an open door, but it's really true. Because if you ask 10 people on their opinion in a particular ethical dilemma, you will get 10 different answers. So we strongly believe in a multidisciplinary approach, looking at dilemmas from various angles, and then find the best way forward. It is a model that has proven to work so far. Of course, since its early days in the use of Gen AI, we can handle it in this way. It doesn't mean that is also the future model, but for now it works best for us. And we already had some experience, of course, in AI in general, because you have Gen AI, you have AI. Banks in general have already been working with AI for 30 years, right? There's the simple regression models. Not everything is very complex, to be very honest. So we have learned a lot over the years already. But Gen AI is a different ballgame, a new ballgame, and we really find that we have to learn a lot, we have done so by looking into the use cases, because this is where you really dive deep in some of the new risks that we see. At hallucination, we never had hallucination problems. Now we do have them in every use case, right? So how do you deal with that in a good way? How do you detect it even? Because and this is, I think, also a big lesson learned when using AI or Gen AI, is that the output is usually not completely correct. But how do you recognize that, right? And so by having this multidisciplinary approach and also having good use case management and applying it to the business areas that we feel benefit most from Gen AI, we learn the most. Because not for every problem Gen AI is a solution. Sometimes traditional AI is a solution, and sometimes the current way of working is absolutely fine. And so by having these considerations, by listening carefully to also the user feedback and the client feedback, we learn as we go. And I think that is what is essential. You really have to experience it yourself to actually learn how to best deal with it. So that's a little bit how we deal with it with ING.
Thank you, Marielle. Rob?
Yeah. My name is Rob Elsinga. I'm the National Technology Officer for Microsoft in the Netherlands. So I'm the CTO, but very much focused on emerging tech and impact on society. I lead a team that is focused on privacy, on compliance, on cybersecurity, but also on responsible AI. So Microsoft has a global structure of dealing with responsible AI, with the standards, with building a culture, but also implementing the right tools and the right processes to make sure that all the technology that we produce is produced in a responsible way. So we call that the Responsible AI Office, and we do have a community in the Netherlands of 25 people, where we especially look at training, at culture, but also in how we can support our customers in this journey of building responsible AI systems. So I'm on stage quite a lot, talking to people like yourselves about what the technology is going to bring. A lot about use cases, because one of the biggest challenges is what are the best use cases to start with AI. Those can be individual, those can be on a functional level, but they can also be completely redesigning your customer journey. And I have a lot of conversations with boards about how to apply this technology in your organization. So happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. Natalia?
Brilliant. Hi everyone, my name is Natalia Rodriguez-Martin and I'm a partner at EY in charge of our EY.ai program from a markets and clients perspective. What that means is I have a team of people who lead the transformation of EY as what we call Client Zero, which is essentially everything from our internal disruption to the use of AI, both for internal use but also for the offerings to our clients. At EY, we very much believe that we should be doing everything to ourselves that we are offering to the market. And of course, because we are an assurance organization, doing AI responsibly is very, very important. As part of the EY.ai program, we have devised a three-pillared approach to AI at EY. And we structured it around the transformation of our clients, the transformation of the world, and the transformation of EY itself. And we did that because we wanted to make sure that we were true to our core values and that we made sure that we, everything that we did with AI or through AI was done in a responsible manner. So the way I think about it, and I like the title multidisciplinary, is we very much have to think about the people component, the process component, the governance, the strategy, and these are all pieces of a puzzle that come together and interact, and that's why we've structured our approach in EY the way we have. But our journey started actually 2017 or before, when we actually did the consolidation of all of our technology platforms. So we've been working with AI and through AI for quite a long time. It's just that ChatGPT has accelerated that journey substantially. So my team looks at all of those transform world, transform EY, and transform client pillars, and how can we make sure that everything we do is done in a responsible and fair way. So very happy to be with you today and share some of the EY stories.
Thank you. I think, yes, again, impressive leaders on stage, so proud to be here. Maybe to start with you, Marielle, you explained that the importance of the organizational structure. How can an organization foster a culture that prioritizes ethical AI? And how is that set up within ING? And maybe you can also explain some of the working groups that you are in, because I think you participate in many.
Yeah. So it's always the happy few who get invited to all the parties, right? So it starts with, understanding your company culture, right? And understanding your risk appetite. And for a financial, we are very conservative, and there's a reason for that, because we service a lot of customers. So whenever we put something in the market, it has a big effect. So that is something that is in the back of our minds always. So also, because we're a big corporate, we have lots of very good people with deep expertise. So we actually we involve them when we look at these type of initiatives. So we have a governance that consists of both first and second line. First being business, the builders, and second line being the people who have very specialized knowledge and expertise, for example, on cybersecurity, on data protection, on specific other legal requirements that may or not be applicable. So we work together as part of this governance, looking at all the use cases that are brought forward, because then also there's fast learning, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. And of course, we have, as a bank, we have committees for everything, right? So because this is how we do decision making, we have, of course, the AI Act implementation that is extremely important. We're well on track. We have a committee for that, but also for Gen AI, which is very different type of implementation that we also want to govern in a good way.
Can you maybe explain who is in the Gen AI board or in the AI Act committee?
Well, it's a combination of expertise areas. It is especially the let's say the risk functions that have a natural connection to the AI Act. For example, model risk. If you work in a bank, we have very mature model development and model validation teams. And the AI Act also has an impact on, for example, categorization of models, right? There's prohibited models, high-risk models, etc. So we have to relabel or recategorize the models that we currently have. Credit risk models, for example, are high risk in the AI Act, so we do that. Then data protection also has a lot of overlap with the AI Act. Think about transparency, think about the human in the loop. All of these obligations from the AI Act, we already know from the GDPR. And so we have to remap that, make sure we implement this in an efficient way to make sure business can apply this as easy as possible.
No, thank you. It's correct. It's not always new, and I think that's also sometimes that we forget. I think we do already a lot, but it is so multidisciplinary that we really need to bring all the people together.
Yeah.
And maybe Natalia, can you explain a bit how EY has structured, and also making sure that throughout the organization AI, responsible AI, is implemented?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, at the end of the day, we've looked at a number of different challenges that came our way as we were looking to implement. And really, I think of these as two sides of a coin, the operational components, but also the people component. So if you think about the operational challenges and the way that we've structured ourselves to address them, we had to go back to basics and think about what is AI, what is the definition of AI, essentially, and what constitutes an AI system and what doesn't, right? We had a number of complex and distributed AI inventories across the organization. We didn't have a standardized process, so all of this was what we had to correct and what we had to really build on fairly quickly, because obviously this technology is evolving very quickly, and the regulation is evolving very quickly, as well as the technology itself. So I think from an operational perspective, we've structured ourselves around all of the different pillars of the organization, mindful of the fact that we are very decentralized, and therefore, this is a federated structure. But what I think is key is then how we've tackled the people side of it, because at the end of the day, the people side of it, I think for me is one of the keys. We've had to look at this from a stakeholder perspective. You need stakeholder buy-in, and you need stakeholder communication and stakeholder investment in order to make this work. And also, and I imagine this is the same for a lot of our clients and a lot of you in the room, when it comes to stakeholders in a large organization, they are working in silos, and this is something that isn't really going to help when it comes to implementation and responsible AI, because you need that multidisciplinary and that breakage of silos. And you either have people working on silos, or you actually have people thinking they own AI, or they own that particular part. And that's also not helpful. So we've had to be very clear and give very strict guidelines around how this shouldn't be the case and how people should be coming together. So I think, at the end of the day, this is some of the approaches that we've been taking to overcome the challenges that are inherent in the way that we're structured.
Yeah, I recognize the working in silos, but I think we make make good steps. And maybe Rob, you explained that the community, the responsible AI. Can you explain a bit more in detail what it is and who is part of that and how the AI governance is structured?
So maybe starting at the governance. So Microsoft is dealing with responsible AI since 2016. And we started with a committee advising our top leadership, not only with technology engineering people, but also ethics, ethicists, philosophers, people looking at the broader impact of AI. So we have short-term opportunity and short-term risk, but we also have long-term risks if these models become very, very smart. So doing this in a responsible way has led to the implementation of, let's say, the principles of fairness, transparency, security, all the things that we, at this moment, I think, generally agree on. But having principles is not enough to make sure that the software that is getting out of the factory is implemented accordingly to these principles. So next to that, Microsoft implemented something called the Office of Responsible AI, being responsible for the standards, defining the standards for our organizations. Those have been revised, by the way, in 2022 because of Gen AI. So making a standard for algorithms in specific use cases developed for a specific cause is much different than suddenly having something with a very powerful large language model behind it. They focus on compliance, on training our people and making sure that we have almost the most important thing is that we have a culture where everyone understands that these principles have to be in our software from the beginning. So from the design to the development and implementation of the software. So that is the Office of Responsible AI. And in each country we have a Responsible AI champ, as we call it. That's me for the Netherlands. And what we try to do is make sure that we, for every segment, from finance, for public sector, but also from a specialist perspective, we have the right knowledge and resources to deal with challenging questions. For example, if a customer comes to us and says, well, we want to implement this specific system, the first the thing that we ask ourselves, is there AI in there? Is there Gen AI in there? Is there potentially a sensitive use case? And they're often very hard to recognize. Is there a potential use case in there that is sensitive? And if so, let's work together on making an impact analysis and see how we can identify what these potential risks are. And not to say, well, you can't implement that because it's too risky, but how can we mitigate and how can we do this in such a way that it is responsible?
Thank you. And if we look now, Marielle, more at the preparing an organization for innovation, what are the key steps? And also keeping in mind, of course, the legislation, regulation.
Well, there's always people who embrace it immediately, and there's always people who are extremely fearful of change, right? And I think the only way forward is to, as fast as possible, do a lot about learning, right? So what is it? What is it exactly? What is it? What is it, and what is it not? And often, if you really dive deep into those new technologies, right? It's just a new technology. It's not. It's not per se a complete mind shift in how people interact or how processes work, right? So really nailing it down to what it actually is, to increase the knowledge levels as soon as possible, and then start organizing yourselves, because this is of course a development that will be determining the future of any sector or industry, I think. So you really need to think carefully, what are the areas where we want to learn fast? And what are the areas where we can best use this new technology, and how can we make sure that the people who need to build this and who need to work with this are up to par as soon as possible. And so that is how we try to do this, because otherwise you will have misunderstandings all the time and big debates if you want to do these initiatives. Because I fully agree with you that the fact that there's risks means we need to think about mitigation. And no risk can ever go fully away, right? But you have to think carefully about what risks do we find acceptable, what risks does our regulator find acceptable, so there's other stakeholders than just our internal opinions, and how can we best move forward. And sometimes it means, okay, it's critical risk. Unfortunately, this is not for us. But in many cases, there is always a way forward. It's a mindset thing, right? It's not about, this is the policy and therefore you can't do it. It's how can we make this work given the requirements that are applicable? And if you think in that way, often you will find a solution.
Yeah, and there is a lot happening in the market also in terms of the regulation. We have the AI Act adopted 1st of August, prohibited systems that are, you have to turn them off 1st of February. And we have the AI Pact, actually, and that is a voluntary commitment of organizations signing that they will comply to the requirements upfront. And Microsoft has signed it. Can you explain, Rob, a little bit why did Microsoft sign the AI Pact?
Yeah, we signed the AI Pact. So, of course, we are very much looking into the AI Act and trying to understand it. And to start off with, we think as Microsoft that regulation is a good thing. We should definitely regulate and make sure that this technology is being used responsibly, because it can be used as an opportunity, but it can also be misused or, let's say, cause harm where we did not intend this harm. So the regulation is good. The AI Pact is indeed a voluntary agreement. It was signed on the 15th of September. There were 1,000 organizations present, and I believe 100 organizations amongst ourselves have signed, basically having a pledge in order to prepare and be early ready for the AI Act when it fully comes to effect. So like you said, it came in effect in 1st of August, but it will actually be April, May in 2025 when it will be fully detailed out. So Jeroen van Hoven, one of the professors of the University of Utrecht, he said basically, we've been handed a household screwdriver, but we have to repair a pocket watch. So there is a lot of work to do. So there is a lot of work to do, especially in the area of general purpose AI systems. So GPT-4, for example, is a general purpose AI system. And there is a lot of work to be done about the responsibilities, the definitions. What is a developer of these systems? What is a deployer? So there will be different responsibilities across the supply chain, as I may call it. So you will have a responsibility as a bank, for example, if you develop a solution and bring it to the market. Microsoft has a responsibility as sometimes a developer and sometimes so assessing those risks and see how we can mitigate these risks in the general purpose AI systems is to be detailed out in working groups, and that will take the next year. So what we've done in our pledge is basically said, well, we will present and be early in presenting our governance strategy, how we deal with these kind of systems, how we like to mitigate this. And one very important thing that is really close to my heart is how do we deal with AI literacy? And AI literacy is being handled within organizations. So people or organizations are starting to train their people because they do understand it does not only require a data and AI team that we had a couple of years ago, and when you knock on their door and ask for a new algorithm, they produce it and they let it use. No, everyone can use AI now, but needs to understand how it can elevate their own individual or functional work. So that's the reason why we believe regulation is good, and we are more than happy to also be ready in the market and lead the way.
Yeah, I think it's a great sign. I don't know, Marielle, how important is it for ING that Microsoft signs a pact?
Well, we welcome any other industry also getting some rules, right? Because we're used to it in the financial sector, obviously. Yeah. But without joking, it does create a level playing field. And also it increases trust. Because now, obviously, when we interact with vendors, we have to have tough discussions, deep discussions on what is it that actually we are getting. What is it what guardrails are already there, and what additional guardrails will we have to design ourselves. So it requires a lot of effort to understand the technology, to understand how does it work in a safe way, in a safe enough way for a financial institution. That's very different than for maybe some other industries, right? But we have very strict rules around how we protect our customers and employees. So by having this AI pact and then also the intention to comply with the obligations from the AI Act, it creates sort of an understanding. There's a couple of things we do and there's a couple of things we don't do, right? And there's basic measures in place that protects data. And that protects data because that is obviously the reason it protects consumers, the fundamental rights of individuals, because that's the whole reason why we do this, right? It's about avoiding data to be used in such a way that becomes really creepy. And by having this and by all parties involved applying it, and especially the big techs, because everybody, of course, there's only a limited few of you, right? So we all, of course, leverage on that capability and the beautiful technology that it brings us. But it is also a systemic risk in the market. So if those big players proactively comply with the obligations we need to have in place in order to have protection of our consumers, that's a good thing.
No, I fully agree. And personally, I'm very interested also more than in your role, because I think as a DPO, we had GDPR over the last years, now also play a big role in AI, in the AI Act. How are you perceived within in ING? And the reason why I'm asking, often you saw that the privacy officer was involved at the end of a process as seen as a blocker. But how is that with AI and all the new risks?
Well, you know, it depends on who you ask, right? But having said that, right, if you want to do this, not as an amateur, but as a professional, you got to know what you're building and you got to know what risks you're managing, right? I'm always very simple. You know, you have those project managers who are like, oh, well, I have to do this risk assessment. Yes, you got to make a business case, you got to recruit people, and you do a risk assessment, because that will help you build your solution. Because if we understand exactly what it is we're trying to mitigate, we have it embedded, it doesn't become on top of things, you don't have to deal with a whole army of people monitoring you. If we make it as easy as possible for each other, it's probably going to be the best for everybody. So we do have good discussions. You know, we always say no friction, no shine. But we do respect each other, and in the end, often we do agree on the risks and how we need to address them. So we will probably not make life particularly easy for everybody. But we also help in thinking about good measures, right? Given a particular risk, how we can best deal with it, because we are involved in all of these initiatives and we learn fast as a risk organization, probably much faster than the individual project manager that's doing this one project. So that's really, so in the end, you know, it's a bit of both, right? Also by being able to leverage on good legal people and good compliance people, you get in the end a rock solid solution, which is to the benefit of our customers and which is, you know, something we strive for. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed, it comes back to the multidisciplinary collaboration again. And I think indeed the financial sector is maybe a bit ahead, given also the model risk management and the experience. So maybe to Natalia, you work, of course, globally as a market leader. How is the AI and the maturity of AI in the sectors, across the sectors? Do you see a big difference?
We do. I think we have, as we think about the sectors, you know, the most advanced ones will have a high level of digitalization. They will have data that is available to them already, and they will usually have a need for this, right? So they'll need operational efficiency, they'll need to innovate. And I mean, no surprise, right? Regulated sectors like financial services, regulated sectors, you know, ourselves as a profession, we are very much disrupted, but also we are very much in need of that control of doing things responsibly. responsibly and as an assurance organization, have a need to make sure that we are being quite careful. So I think in terms of the sectors that we see advanced, financial services, definitely on fraud detection, on risk management, on algorithmic training. You've got also healthcare. Healthcare is of course, because of the sensitivity of the data, very, very advanced. They've been using, by the way, this technology, as someone said earlier, is not new, right? So the generative AI part of it is new, but organizations have been dealing with AI for quite some time. So healthcare we see is quite advanced as well when it comes to things like acceleration of drug development, or many of the personalization of treatments for patients. But actually, I have to say, when it comes to large organizations, you do get organizations in retail and in manufacturing who are also getting there, right? They're looking at their inventory management, they're looking at their production, their supply chain, even energy. You think about smart grids and things like that. So I think. Yes, there's a difference between some of the more advanced sectors and others, but I also think there's an organizational component. Those that have invested in advance on their data consolidation or their data readiness probably will be ahead anyway. And I think there's just no option to not move ahead, right? We see clients come to us and say, look, we need to do something about this fast. Unlike other technologies where you could afford to wait, here you can't.
Fully agree. We have to embrace it. I don't know, Rob, any response from you? Also, of course, serving the entire market.
Yeah, I must say, let's say, of course, banks are very cautious, but it's in their DNA. What I like very much is those organizations who say, well, let's bring these functions together in let's call it a competence center, whatever you call it, a steering committee, but make sure that you don't go from door to door to get your project designed, approved, and make sure that you have a team of people that are, well, we used it earlier, multidisciplinary, work together, understand what the technology can do, what the requirements are, and make sure that you have this competence center that can really help advance solutions. And I see organizations who try to get their data management, their data governance in order, and to get all the risk in order, for example, and try to boil the oceans, and they fail because they don't make any progress. Having a competence center, but also focusing on a use case that is really important for you, is maybe not the most riskful in using sensitive data and those kind of things, but making sure that you use this project to learn together and make sure that when it enters the market, it is safe and it has all the checks applied to it. I think that is the best approach. That's what I.
Can you explain maybe how you help clients with implementing use cases, and maybe even when it's a sensitive use case?
Yeah, so one of the first things we do is make sure that people get on the same level of understanding what the technology can do. And at the same time, we do realize that things that you were not able to do 3 weeks ago, for example, are suddenly possible. So the technology is also very, very quickly changing. What we start off is having a conversation with the board, making sure that everyone understands this is not a responsibility of the CIO, of the IT department, or the compliance department, whatever. No, this is something that should be in your strategy. You should really think about how is this technology going to impact ourselves. And often when I talk to a board, it is the CIO and the CEO or the CMO who really understand it, but the board is much broader. I like the chief HR officer really understand their role in making sure that everyone is ready, that there is a different culture, that people are used to getting into these changes. So then we start with finding the right use cases, and when we have a use case, is make sure that we do this, I would almost say, do this sensitivity check. And when there is a sensitivity, let's say, flagged, make sure we have an impact assessment, that we describe it, that we have workshops together, and make sure that we understand it from multiple angles. And once we have that, build it with responsibility in mind.
Yeah, I think I really like, I think it's really a human, humans are so important. Really, a people side is key.
It's key, yeah.
And maybe in Natalia, how do you see an organization implement AI solutions responsibly, but also having that value realization while managing also the trust?
Yeah, no, you've teed it up very nicely, right? At the end of the day, it is about humans. I think you need to have ethical governance. I think you have to have sustainable practices, and I think you really have to be inclusive from the start when you're looking at these things. And, you know, we made a very deliberate decision to, you know, eat our own dog food or whatever they say and the expression is, and apply, you know, a golden rule, which is really what we see in the market, no matter what kind of transformation you do, is that if you put the human at the center, if you focus on the human, you know, you're 3 times more likely to actually have success in that transformation, because a lot of transformations do fail. And so we structure the entire AI transformation of EY around the human. And so what that means is that when you think about scaling responsibly, you're ultimately thinking about kind of learning, and you're thinking about adoption. So some of the things that we've done are, you know, back to the point around literacy, so a very comprehensive training program where we started with the board and we do executive boot camps every 3 months, which is why I'm flying to Mexico next week and Australia the week. You know, so this is really about making sure that our leadership understands this as much as our people understand it. So there's a learning component here. There's also a continuous learning component, right? Because ultimately, because this is a probabilistic, not a deterministic technology, and it's going to learn and evolve, and new things are going to come in so fast, is how do you make sure that everybody keeps abreast of everything that is happening? There's then a piece around knowledge sharing. You know, we created a citizen community, developer community. We created a low-code, no-code environment so people could actually build things together in a safe environment, you know, within the structure of the organization. And we created an AI champions network, which I think a lot of organizations have, to make sure that people are learning and knowledge sharing from each other, but also are understanding what are some of the risks, some of the things that they have to avoid doing. So I think peer-to-peer learning is really key. And the final thing on learning is, you know, we invest a lot of time and effort and money, not just on research and development from the perspective of technology or, you know, assurance, but also working with external organizations, you know, with policymakers, with the World Bank, with the UN, to just try to make sure that we're not forgetting that AI and society piece that is really important to us. The other thing I will say is there is the learning piece, but there is the adoption component. So change management is absolutely critical, right? Making sure that you've got clear communications, that you've got one message from the top, back to the point about the board, and if they don't understand it, how are the people supposed to, right? So the piece around communication, and then we need to be very clear on the guidelines around privacy and security. People need to know what they need to know, and employees need to be socialized on this across the board. I guess the final thing I will say is because we've got this scalable infrastructure from a data perspective, that makes life a lot easier for us at EY to not only scale the applications, but also to monitor and kind of control and continue to track the adoption use. And I think that is also very, very key. You know, what gets measured gets done kind of thing. Well, in this case, what gets measured and what gets tracked, you know, gives us the information we need to avoid any future potential risks. So this is some of the things that I think we're
yeah, I really like the learning and the upskilling. I think it's crucial. I don't know, Marielle, how is that within ING?
The upscaling, you mean?
Yeah, and the learning is how I feel.
So the reason why you start with you know, proof of values is actually for the learning, right? And so we explicitly choose a couple of use cases in parallel so that we can compare, right? And we can learn fast. After such a proof of value, we then evaluate. And the hardest thing, because you have particular criteria for success, right? And the hardest thing is to get actually to those criteria and then to be able to scale. But that's not unique to Gen AI or AI, to be very honest. I've worked a lot with fintechs in the past, in a previous role. But the scaling part is a very different, you need a very different capability, and you also need to, it's very hard to actually achieve a successful scale up because you can build an AI system in a couple of weeks, right? It's not very difficult. It's just having some smart people building something. But then to be able to scale it to such a level that all of our customers can actually use it, that's a huge challenge. And I think that's in general with startups. This is also why a lot of startups fail. This is also why a lot of AI projects will fail. And that's absolutely fine, because you fall down and you learn, and then you reapply.
And how do you upskill the people within ING?
You mean upskill of knowledge? Of people?
In knowledge. In terms of
So
knowledge.
in different ways. So there's generic trainings for everybody. And then there's, of course, people who are very close to the fire, if you will. So people who develop models, of course, need to have particular knowledge on ethical considerations, like the use of age or the use of nationality, right? And how we deal with this in such a way it doesn't lead to discrimination, for example. And there will be other people in other business domains who will have other ethical considerations that we need to do training on. So depending on the use cases that we develop, we apply the learning to the groups of people who actually deal with them.
Yep. And how is that in Microsoft, Rob? Learning?
Learning. No, well, maybe let's start close to home. We are, let's say, you can build your own solutions, and we have a platform there with it. You can choose your own large language model, development tools, whatever, to build your own system. But we also do have Copilot, and Copilot, for example, in our Outlook, in our Microsoft 365 environment. And as a global company with, let's say, 230,000 people, we also need to make sure that people start to use that and learn how to apply that to be more productive, creative, whatever. So actually, we do have a program in our own office. So every month we have one Friday where we spend solely on learning, and that is not only on what the technology can do, but also on compliance, for example, how we deal with this technology. We even on the third floor we have an airline setup with airline chairs and those kind of things, because it's called Copilot. So and we have a whole flight schedule with sessions for people to learn about how they can apply it in their work. And even an organization like Microsoft has to invest time and money and create, I would almost say, enthusiasm among people and show what it can do. Because I have so often, when I ask people, when they come to me, I ask them, well, did you ask Copilot to solve this? And then often people say, well, no, I haven't. Please do and try it. So even at Microsoft, it is a very important thing.
Now I recognize I have it since 1 week, Copilot, so I probably need some training, continuous training. But yeah, really, I love it. Maybe some final tips and tricks before we open for any questions. I don't know, Marielle, any final words from you? What is key in the multidisciplinary collaboration when we speak about AI?
Yeah, start doing it, I say, but not in an irresponsible way. That's in very short what I would give. Yeah, because you only learn by doing, right? You need to get the experience to apply it to your own sort of area of expertise. So and by also learning from each other, the learning goes fast. Yeah.
Final word from you, Rob?
My final tip would be involve your organization to think about how it can change their work. So do it in a hackathon, whatever, but make sure that you also have a top-down approach, but also a bottom-up approach, so that people start to think about how their work can be improved with AI. And I think when these come together, I think you will be most successful.
Natalia?
I would say think about the risk piece of this. So the AI risk is any other risk you would look at, right? So it is ultimately about the risk appetite of the organization, but also it's about the strategy of the organization. And this is something that shouldn't be just looked at from a risk perspective. It should also be looked at from a value perspective. It can bring a huge amount of value. Doing it responsibly will certainly bring a lot more value. Doing it responsibly will also mean you scale much faster. Because a lot of the time what we're finding is that the majority of the scaling of AI is slowed down or doesn't scale properly because people don't trust it, because people don't understand the problem that is being addressed in the first place, because it's biased. So by making sure that it's responsible, it's actually a value-adding thing here. So I think that's what I would end up with saying.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the room? Before probably lunchtime, but happy to get question. There is a microphone.
Yes, hello. My name is Stephen Townley. I'm a lawyer, businessman, and international arbitrator and mediator. I'm very curious as to how, although I congratulate the panel, it was a great session, why it is when you talk about fostering responsible AI in multidisciplinary collaboration, how do you integrate content, creative content providers in that dialogue? Because most of the conflicts, like the Screenwriters Guild in Los Angeles, have arisen really with this issue of creative content and how those skills are now being adopted by LLMs and others to reproduce different content. So is the content and the creative community part of your dialogue?
Yeah,
Shall I take it?
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah, definitely it is. So it will almost reinvent complete industries, like, for example, the creative industry, marketing bureaus, the movie industry, for example. And it will also require a redefining how people are getting incentivized for their work. And I think this is exactly what is happening. It will affect many jobs and roles. And we often thought, well, the creative industry is probably the last who will be affected by technology because that requires individual creativity and those kind of things. And guess what? They may be the first to be affected by it. So it's not a simple answer. It will require, let's say, a dialogue between employers, between the creative industry, but between people who look at the social aspects and the tech industry to discuss how are we going to incentivize people. It's a difficult question. Yeah.
And I would say your question is also a question that you could ask about every other sector, right? So as we at EY work with our clients across sectors, you know, the reimagination of the workforce is and what the roles of those individuals will be with regards to whatever content they are using is going to be critical. I mean, I don't look at it for us, for EY, as a content piece necessarily only, but also if you think about the way we do business, we have a commercial model that is based on time and expense. So if you imagine a consulting organization, we all of a sudden don't have the ability to do that because 700 hours becomes 1 hour with AI. So again, it's not about the content, but I think all of the sectors out there will have to be reimagined.
With respect, though, I disagree with you. The creative content industry has this thing called intellectual property and moral rights. And they don't sit within your organization, they sit outside it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for the talk. My name is Anselm Fenka. I'm AI project manager at the Artificial Intelligence Center Hamburg. And yes, I'm programming on AI. And I have one question to you. How do you deal with the problem that on the one side, we want to have a multidisciplinary team that considers all possible challenges. But on the other side, if we make a team too big, then things get slower. You get more talking, less programming and stuff like this. So is there, for example, a maximum team size you should have, a specific part of functions that you should fulfill, or what do you do?
Maybe Marielle?
Yeah, I guess the answer to that question is dedication, right? So dedicated, deep knowledge experts who can respond fast. I used to be, before I was the global DPO, I was the CRO of a business area where we did all disruptive innovation. And so we did blockchain, for example, etc. Right? So we have to make sure they're super focused people helping the project managers. First of all, identify the risks that are applicable. Not everything is applicable in every project, right? And then help find solutions fast. But and this is also something. This is why a lot of firms are thinking about centers of excellence, where there's dedicated people with very specialized knowledge are helping those projects. And in this stage, where the number of use cases is overseeable, that's absolutely a model that can work, and the learning can then be applied to the bigger community as we become more mature. But But you're right, right? Sometimes it slows you down a little bit, but sometimes that's okay, right? And sometimes it's necessary. But I understand exactly, this is exactly also the internal discussion we have, right? Speed versus do this in a responsible way. Yeah.
Thank you. I think there was a question over there.
Thank you very much. First of all, great session. Thanks all the panelists. And also I really appreciate the first question about creative content, how AI is going to impact them. There will be a panel on Friday afternoon about art, AI, integrity, originality, and the impact of AI on artists and creative content developers. So my question to the panelists, we have discussed a lot about responsible AI. And then we never talked much about irresponsible AI, because we know that things can go wrong, either in the data collection itself, right? You said data could be biased, racist, judgmental, whatsoever, or the development of the model itself. So maybe a wrong usage of the algorithms, or the data scientists could have malicious intents, right? And deployment of the model, because we know that over the data changing, model could drift from responsible to irresponsible, right? Or the person who is using it could interpret it wrongly or with a bad intention, you never know. And it also, every AI project, AI model could have a perception in the organization or in the society. So when things go wrong in any of these stages, what shall we do? Whom shall we blame? Or who is going to be judged? Or even in the worst case scenario, who's going to pay the fine or be in the jail? You know.
Yeah.
I don't know, Marielle, Rob, if you would like to...
Yeah, I like the question, and because, let's say, when we design things, things may be clear, but things may change, or in using the system, we find out that there are risks that we could not have thought of. So having, first of all, accountability, and it's one of the principles, having someone who is really accountable for the systems that you are going to provide. And of course, there will be a supply chain behind that, so we have to discuss that as well. But accountability of a system is very important. Monitoring of that system after whatever, 2 weeks, 3 months, a year, is also required. So having a dashboard for your system and regularly check that is very important. If we look at, let's say, the supply chain, of course, the AI Act is very much, let's say, looking into that. Who has a responsibility? Is it OpenAI, the developer of the model, for example, who is responsible for this? Is it the deployer of the model, the cloud provider, like Microsoft, for example, who's putting it in the market? Or is it the bank who is building a solution, or the software vendor building the solution? And we are especially looking at the moment, discussing where should responsibility lie. Microsoft is trying to take as much as possible away from a compliance perspective, explaining how our systems work, putting guardrails around it, for example, but also giving commitments about that we will not train on your data, or not give your data to someone else to process it, or even copyright infringement. We will take the legal responsibility that if you are being blamed of infringing copyrights, that Microsoft is going to take the blame. But it still requires a handshake across the whole supply chain.
Thank you, Rob. I think the monitoring has changed. It's not every year testing your model, but it's continuous monitoring. I think that is. I think we really need to evaluate the monitoring piece.
Yeah, and the AI Act really brings clarity in responsibility, right? Look at the Uber case, right? Uber, many big platforms claimed for a long time, we're just the IT provider, and the users are responsible for what happens on the platform. That no longer is an acceptable excuse. So you see that there's an evolution going on, right? Where tech providers are no longer just the tech provider, but also responsible for what happens on their platform. And that will hopefully be a continuation in that development, because we would really, because I think that's the right movement. And that also means when you start organizing yourself, you need to have clear ownership. So that people, a person, I always say, somebody needs to feel the pain of getting it wrong, right? Because otherwise nothing gets done to make it right. And the AI Act really helps there, yeah, for that further development. That's a good question, yeah.
Thank you for the question. I think maybe the final question.
Hello, my question is about the bias. For example, if somebody is, you said a person with the deeper knowledge should be incorporated at the beginning. Let's say if a person has unconscious bias, how do we make it ensure that it is not hindering the process of implementing the AI?
Shall I give it a shot? So if I understand you correctly, how do you deal with bias?
Unconscious bias.
Unconscious bias. Yeah. So first of all, I think we can all agree that there will be bias in any large language model, because it's been trained on, let's say, on the internet, where there is lots of bias. So what you can do is, at the beginning, is making sure that the prompts that are being asked are proper and don't have bias in there, and make sure that you steer in a direction. So if people want to misuse it, the model, then you can say, well, we don't like that. And the same you can do with content moderation, for example, in bias, in also, I would almost say, making sure that the bias will not be in the answer. But during the process, you can make sure that with reinforcement learning, but also with technical tools like, for example, testing which large language model is the best for your use case. For example, you can start very early in the development of your model also to make sure that bias is minimized. That will not say that bias is completely eradicated. So that's why we talk about a co-pilot. You also need to make sure that people are still, I would almost conscious of the fact that there can still be bias in a model or hallucination, for example.
Yeah. Well, we also, in addition to US, so what you always need to consider when you're building a model or you're applying AI is, do you really need the data that you for the purpose of your model, right? So if age could be a data field that could cause bias, because statistical data by default is biased, right? But if you can choose particular data fields to use in your model, obviously, to avoid, because some people think, okay, I just use all the data that I have, right? But by applying data minimization or even anonymization of particular data, you can also avoid bias. So there's various techniques you can apply to remove it to some extent, but I don't think you can ever fully remove it, you know. But it really depends on the model and the application and the use. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would really like to thank you, Marielle, Rob, Natalia, for being here. Really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the panel, and yeah, I'm wishing you a good rest of the event and enjoy your lunch. So thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thanks.